Hey guys, welcome to the Whole Lot of Jesus podcast. This is a podcast where we talk all about testimonies. I'm your host, Carly Rains, and today I have with me a good friend. I consider her a friend. We actually ran together, not on the same team, but we were in the same conference. She ran in college at Ouachita Baptist, and that's how we connected. I can't even remember how we exactly started chatting and
hmm
connecting. But we did over time of those years of us running together. So this is
hmm
Kirsten Tackett, and y'all live in Hot Springs,
We do.
Arkansas. And you and your husband met at, did you say New Life?
Yes, New Life Church
New
in
Life
Hot Springs.
Church. Yes. And so y'all are married. Y'all have one little girl. How old is she?
She is about 16 months. I would just say a year and change, you know?
Okay, okay, yeah. So she is over a year old. Okay, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Um,
And
named Addison, and yeah, tell us a little bit about. I know y'all. He does entrepreneur stuff. And just tell us a little bit about yourself and all that
yeah.
good stuff.
I was actually thinking of it the other day, kind of going back in my mind, going, when did we start? Because I remember it was at SAU and it
Yeah.
was at a conference, I believe, for track. And I think we connected in the bathroom. Like you were braiding your hair, getting ready for a race. And I think I asked maybe what was your event? And it was just we were running the same event. And that kind of triggered our conversation. And then we were not in the same heat because you were a lot faster than me. But I remember we were doing warm-ups and everything together and then visiting afterwards. And I was like, man, she's so kind. Like we're not on the same team, but we just kind of start talking. So yeah, I went to Ouachita. I met Jonathan my sophomore year. I was a very non-traditional student. So when I was a sophomore, I was actually 26 years old. I went back to school after taking many gap years. And I did meet Jonathan at New Life Church in Hot Springs. We just kind of clicked right off the bat. I was kind of coming off of a season where I was just finally like, okay, God, it's me and you. I'm not going to be searching anymore. If you bring someone into my life, great. But like for the first time in my life, I'm content. And then I met Jonathan, and Jonathan's side of the story is he always tells us I wasn't interested in him. He was trying to drop hints, and I was just like, we're just friends. And so he had moved to Hot Springs. He grew up in Amarillo, and he had taken a job in Hot Springs. He knew of our pastors now at the church because he had a connection from Amarillo, like, hey, when you get to Hot Springs, go to New Life Church. And then I went because of mutual friends, we connected, and then kind of the rest is history.
Oh my gosh,
But
he's from Amarillo. How old is he?
he is 26.
Okay,
So there's about a 2 year age gap between us, which was
so
another thing that kind of blew my mind because when I met him, he was so mature. And so I was thinking, oh, for sure he has to be my age. And then I found out later, I was like, oh, he's 23. Wow, he's a little bit younger.
he's a little bit
So
younger. No, it's
I
okay.
know.
Briston was the
But
same way. He is very mature for his age. He's 22, I'm 25.
okay, yeah.
So there was a big gap, but he was very, yeah. I mean, I figure with all the entrepreneur stuff he's doing, you gotta be mature,
You'd have
and
to be, yeah.
doing that stuff. But Amarillo, oh my gosh, I went to high school right outside of Amarillo.
No way. Which high
Yeah,
school?
no way. It was a tiny town called Panhandle. It was a 2A
Yes,
school.
okay.
And it's like 30 miles from Amarillo. Did he
Okay.
live in Amarillo?
He did. He went to Tascosa. So he
Mm.
was, I think
No
they're
way,
the
yeah.
Rebels, Tascosa Rebel. And
I knew a
so it's a
guy.
small world.
No, yeah, that's so cool. There was a guy, our pastor's son actually, he
Uh-huh.
did wrestling for Tascosa. He was like he was when I was a freshman in high school, sorry guys, we're connecting. But when I was a freshman in high
Connecting all the
school,
dots.
yeah, he was a senior and he did wrestling for Tascosa. He was their state champ. So
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm sure Jonathan knows him then.
probably
Knows
because
of him.
Jonathan's a year older than me, so he would have been a sophomore. Okay,
Yeah.
anyways, we'll have to connect later.
I know. You'll have to
Um,
text me his name and I'll tell Jonathan because he was
yeah, yeah,
he
that's
knew
so
everybody in high
cool.
school.
Yeah,
That's
that's so
awesome.
cool.
Yeah, it's a small world. And then I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and then we
Okay.
met in Hot Springs. So it's really like only God could do that. Um, you try as hard as you can to like make things work as a human, and then if you just kind of be like, okay, God, he'll just do his thing. So yeah, grew up at opposite ends of Texas, met in Hot Springs. He is an entrepreneur. He has his own alarm company. We're starting a gym here. He boxed in Amarillo. He started boxing at 12 and then started coaching it later, and so now we're kind of reincorporating that in Hot Springs because there's nothing really like it there. And so, yeah, and then he's has a lot of other little businesses on the side that he's has a hand into, but he just graduated and knew college wasn't for him, so he just kind of went right into the workforce. And um, to me, and I know to a lot of other people, he's been very successful at it. So I'm very proud of him.
That's so
But
cool. That's so cool.
yeah,
Him and Briston could so connect. Briston did not want to go to college. He was like, but his mom kind of uh encouraged him.
yes,
And
strongly encouraged.
yes, but if he wouldn't have gone, we wouldn't have met. So there is a
That's
purpose in
true.
it. Yeah.
That's true. And honestly, that's my story too. Like I look at it now, and I'm not using my degree, but when you think about it, I was so certain that God called me to Washita, and I just had a peace about it. And then same thing, if I'd never gone to Washita, there's no way we would have connected. I mean,
Yeah.
even too, I worked at a summer camp as kind of the sister camp of the camp Jonathan worked at the same time, and there were so many times our paths crossed that we didn't even realize it. Like I would be somewhere, and then the next day he'd be somewhere, and it just wasn't the time that God had us meet. And so yeah, so there's a part of me that sometimes questions like why did I go to school? I don't use my degree right now, but it's kind of all part of the story.
No,
So
yeah, that's super cool.
yeah.
That's super cool. And y'all, Wichita just won conference
Yes,
DSC
yeah.
championships, which they won 2 years ago. I didn't realize that. Y'all won
They did.
in 2022.
They, I think it was our, so the class right underneath me, they've won two. So they're seniors now. They won this year, and then they won, like you said, a year or two ago. I don't know if
Yeah,
they were sophomores or juniors, but
yeah.
yeah,
And
very proud of
see,
them.
whenever I started running in college, they weren't that good.
No.
Like we would beat them as a team.
Mhm.
And then y'all got, I don't know his name, you know his name, but y'all got
Yes.
Harding's coach, ex-coach,
Hmm.
and he is a great coach, clearly, because
Yes.
he Harding used to win all the time, and now
Hmm.
Wichita's winning all the
They
time.
do. I'm very proud of all of them, honestly. Yeah, Coach Steve came on. He recruited a lot of great girls, and even now it's fun seeing some Hot Springs kids that we've kind of had a part in their lives, just being connected high schools in the area. They go there, and he's got some good runners. So we,
Yeah,
yes, we did not used to be good. It was kind of sad, and he came in and really just worked hard. The girls worked hard, and so I'm very proud of them. It's
yeah,
fun
that's
having
really
like an
good.
alma mater, not really, because I ended up graduating from Liberty. But people say I can still claim it because I transferred. But
Wait, you went to Liberty University?
so I did. So I met Jonathan my sophomore year. I finished up my sophomore year. I we got married right before my junior year. I started commuting about 2, 3 weeks, and then honestly, it just really wasn't for me. I was like, I don't want to drive an hour one way to school, and my classes were kind of so sporadic. It was hard getting them to be consistent with just the drive. And so
Yeah.
I prayed a lot about it, and I just felt at peace. I really feel like I need to transfer to Liberty. I finished online. I was able to work, be connected to a ministry called K Life at the time, be in Hot Springs, and then also finish my degree out. So all my credits were able to be transferred. Liberty was great taking Washita credits, and then I just finished with them. So
That is
so I
so
still do a
crazy.
lot with Washita. I still love going down for a lot of alumni stuff. I have a lot of friends there still, but yeah, I ended up graduating from Liberty
That
last
is
year. So
That is so crazy because I was literally, this is like confirmation, but I was thinking about going back to school and getting another degree, and I was looking
yeah,
at Liberty. So for you to say
it's a great
Liberty.
school. Honestly, I can't like just to plug for them. I'm not sponsored. I would, hey, I would be if they let me. But my professors really, all of them are great. You get to write with a biblical worldview, which is a big blessing these days. Not every school allows that. And so I was very, I mean, even if I could tell maybe professors had a different opinion, they would always grade off of my work, not my opinion. And so I was very grateful for that too. And yeah, just some great professors and courses, and they provide all the books. Like you really just sign up for classes, and then you have ebooks just already attached to your portal. So
Wow, that's
yeah, very cost efficient for us too. But
That's cool. That's cool.
yeah,
Okay, so we're gonna dive into eating disorders. We kind of went,
yes.
but maybe it's good for someone who
True. Hey, you never know. Maybe
needs
someone
to
else is
hear.
out there considering liberty.
Yeah, maybe, maybe. Okay, so you have a really cool testimony about eating disorders. I have not interviewed someone. I'm gonna pull up the questions real fast. I've not interviewed someone about this, but I know from especially girls, I know guys, I've heard guys struggling with this, but I've had some good friends in high school really battle this.
Hmm.
And I kind of said this on my story earlier, but if you would have asked, because I think, and you're going to go into it more, um, like for instance, my really good friend who struggled with an eating disorder, it was a like identity crisis. She
Hmm.
compared herself to other girls who were a lot thinner than her, were lightweight than her, and so it was kind of like this mindset of, well, if I'm gonna be enough, like good enough, I need to be like them. And so she like literally did not eat
Hmm.
enough calories for what she was burning in a day. And thankfully she overcame that. But I remember when she was going through that and I had learned about that, it was something that if you would have asked, like, do you put your identity in body image and how you look, I would have answered no at that time
Hmm.
because I just didn't think that I did. And then I got pregnant, and I kind of
Hmm.
want to add pregnancy into this conversation
Yeah.
because I got pregnant, and if you've been skinny your whole life, when you get pregnant, I don't know for you, especially running,
Mhm.
it was a struggle. And I gained everybody who saw me, who knew me before I was pregnant and then saw my pregnancy journey, they all knew I gained like a ton of weight. And
Yeah.
it was a struggle, a mindset struggle of like, wow, I didn't realize like how much I actually put my worth in what my body looks like. Like
Hmm.
I kind of deceived myself. I never thought I did. And so this conversation of like, how do we have healthy mindsets towards what we look like? And how do we set goals for our body, whether it's working out or eating healthy, that's not obsessive
Yeah.
and that allows for, you to eat dessert and you to just have like a healthy mindset when it comes to what you look like. And so tell us like when did your eating disorder start and can you pinpoint like what caused it?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to talk about all that because like truly it's been a journey and kind of where it started for me, I think I was introduced to unhealthy eating habits at a very young age, not necessarily from my family. Um, Kind of just a quick snippet of my family. I grew up in a strong Christian home. I'm very thankful for that. Not everyone can claim that, and so I'm very thankful for good parents. I'm the third of four siblings, and so I have a sister under me, a sister above me, and then an older brother. And so we grew up not really like, I mean, that wasn't really a thing that was spoken into, especially the girls' lives. Like, I have had friends that have had parents speak negatively towards their children, and that's heartbreaking when you see that. I didn't grow up with that. And so I think it was more of my environment, the people I was around, kind of peers. You start hearing negative things about body image at a young age, and without even realizing it starts taking root in your heart and your mind.
That's
And
good.
so for me, where I would pinpoint where that became more of my own identity, like you said, I remember it was my junior year of high school. I was very involved in cross country and track, more so cross country, which with distance running, as you know, you kind of get fed this lie that the lighter you are, the faster you'll be. And while that is biologically correct in some form, it's not always the case. And I've kind of found that with my own life. I mean, I don't look like your typical cross country runner, and I've now at 29 just learned to accept that, and it's just who I am. At the time, it was very much like you said, an identity crisis for me of just going, hey, if I look this way and if I weigh this amount, then I'm going to be so much better at the sport that I love, and honestly, the sport that I idolized at the time. And so I remember distinctly, I was reading this magazine because this was way before like social media took off. But I was reading a magazine and it was in Runner's World and was talking about just how people who are lighter, people who are more strict with their diet, they see more success in their sport. And so I kind of took on this idea where if I maybe shared it with parents or someone, they could have spoken truth into it. But that was kind of at the time my own idea of coming up of saying, okay, like I got to lose weight because I want to be better. And so I did. I started doing very restrictive eating. And then that kind of morphed into not eating. And so I was maybe eating about 500 calories a day. It was mainly
Wow.
cereal, just so I could tell my family, like, hey, I'm eating. I'm just not hungry. I ate earlier. Like, it wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either.
Yeah.
And then I was running like 8 to 10 miles a day. And so eating a couple bowls of cereal is not enough fuel for distance running. And so after a while, you obviously start becoming more fatigued and you're just not yourself. And I remember so distinctly there's a day that my mom was trying to be helpful and she's like, hey, let me make you a snack. You're about to go out and run again. And I was like, I just had a meltdown. I was like, I can't eat that. Like, don't offer that to me. And then that's where she was kind of like, wait a second, what's going on? And so thankfully, I had the relationship with my mom that I could open up about just kind of the pressures I was feeling and I was self placing on myself. And then I remember that kind of started the whole process of trying to get me to eat again, and that took a while. And then I found macro counting, which seemed like the perfect answer to what I was struggling with at the time, because in my mind, if I could just be aware of what I was eating, then I could eat whatever I wanted as long as I was within my calorie count.
Yeah.
And then that kind of transformed into restrictive eating. And then you start having cheat days, and that kind of started feeding this desire to binge. And so then that's really
Wow.
where I would say I really struggled because you restrict, you restrict, you restrict. And then you get to a day where, okay, it's my cheat day. I'm not gonna track. And then you just try to eat everything you can that you tell yourself 6 days out of the week you can't eat. And so it was just this unhealthy cycle of constantly like, okay, I'm going to restrict, I'm going to be good. And then I get to my cheat day and I'm going to be bad. And then I'm going to get back on. And this went on for, gosh, probably, um, I'm trying to think, maybe 3 years, 4 years. It was a while. And then I hired a coach and like a nutrition coach. And I was thinking if someone can just teach me the right foods to eat, then maybe I can kind of get a handle on struggling with not binging and not tracking and just having this healthy mindset and intuitive eating. That worked a little bit, but there's still a sense of tracking involved, which is still a sense of restriction. I ended up moving states to work a job. And so I was probably about 22 at this point. I thought it was healthy, but actually looking back at pictures, I can really see how unhealthy I was, and it just kind of shows. Um, and so now I'm out of state. I'm with a whole new community that even though they were great people, they loved the Lord, and kept me accountable in my spiritual walk. There wasn't a lot of accountability with my physical habits because I was very secretive about them. And so now this whole diet mindset again and not having people who knew what I was going through to keep me accountable and checking in on me, it kind of then just started this whole binging, restricting cycle. Um, and that got really bad. That's kind of the peak of my eating disorder. And I remember there was just a day where you just kind of recognize how stuck you feel. And I remember sitting in a coffee shop and I called my sister, my older sister, and I just kind of word vomited everything onto her. And there's such a sense of relief because I was living with this lie that what I was doing was so shameful. And if people only knew, everyone would just be disgusted with how I was living my life, how I would. And there's also that lie of going, why do I struggle with something that literally people just do without thinking? Like people can go about their
Yeah.
day and eat and
Yeah.
not be consumed with the stress of it like I was. And so, yeah, I remember just sharing with her. And once I shared with her, I came to this realization of, okay, I need help. Like I've tried for 7 years to do it on my own and it's not working. And so there had been this lady that my mom had found on Instagram that she had shared some videos with me of like, hey, you might be interested. She's got just like healthy habits and all these things. She used to have an eating disorder, you might. And she didn't even know. My mom just has the gift of discernment. And so I had scheduled a call with her because I was like, it's free. I don't know her. I can just kind of share and not feel the shame of sharing with someone I know. And then I remember like the day the call was supposed to happen, I backed out and I was just like, oh yeah, something came up, I can't do it. And I just was like, I don't want to do it. I just once again that lie of what you're struggling with is so shameful, no one should know. And so I just believed that and I didn't do it. And then 3 months go by and I was like, wow, like it just got worse. And so I finally realized I was like, okay, I'm gonna need to just commit and take this phone call. I did. I remember just visiting with the lady, and she has an eating disorder course that
Wow.
she offers. And at the time, it was very expensive. I couldn't afford it. And she asked me a couple questions. She's like, okay, are you a student? We have student discounts. I was like, I'm not. And she was like, okay, well, I'm going to offer it to you anyways at the student price. And so that took off a lot. And so it's like all those excuses I had of why I couldn't do it were kind of going away. And then finally, she's like, okay, think about it. Here's your final price. This is for, I can't even remember how many months it was, but it's for this program. There's been this much success with it. So I get off the phone and I remember, like, okay, God, if you want me to do this, you're just going to have to provide for it because I don't have the money. And and that was just my excuse. I'm like, I can't do it. I can't afford it. That day, I checked my bank account and I had gotten like my tax return, which were like 4 months late, and it was for the exact amount that I needed for the course. And I was like, okay, God, I'll do it. So I enrolled and I started doing the classes. I started showing up for Zoom calls. I started doing all the work. And while that was so helpful in my healing journey, I think it was finally that realization that my head knowledge was getting to my heart of whose I am is way more important than who I think I am. And it's truth that I've known my whole life as a Christian and also as a daughter of parents who love me that reflect my heavenly father. But it just, like you said, it was kind of my identity crisis I was going through of struggling with. I know I'm loved, I know I'm worthy, but yet when I'm this size, when I perform this way, when I, whatever, this is who I am. And without this, I don't know who I am. And so, like I said, the courses were amazing. The lady was great. I still will listen to her podcast sometimes just for kind of just a refresher. But I genuinely just think God used that in my life. And then once I started taking those courses, you start getting very comfortable with sharing what you're going through. And so I started opening up more to instead of just the virtual community I had through the classes, I actually started sharing with my physical community. And that was a huge step in my recovery journey too, of sharing with people what I was going through and kind of realizing that even though people may not understand what you're going through, they love you and they're going to be there for you in whatever capacity you need. Because that was another lie I believed of just going, well, I can't share with them. They don't understand. And that was keeping me very isolated in what I was going through, which was really just prolonging the healing that God was like, hey, I have for you. Just share, just open up, just invite that Christian community, that accountability into your life. So that's kind of 7 years in probably like 5, 10 minutes. But it was just really like looking back, I just see how God orchestrated everything that happened when it was supposed to happen. I was just gonna say, I've had people ask me if I wish I'd never went through that to begin with. And honestly, kind of where I'm at is I've just seen God use it in so many people's lives. And he used other people who struggle with the same thing, encourage me when I was in a moment of feeling just really despaired and isolated and believing the lie that no one knew what I was going through and I would just always be that way. And so, honestly, I heard a quote the other day that I love. It says, God won't protect you from what will perfect you. And I really just kind of view this whole eating disorder as it being hard, but it teaching me the truth of just how much God loved me and how much God loves me, how I am, and not the person I feel like I need to be, not the size I am, not my accolades, not anything that I can earn or do, because that's very workspace. It's just because I'm his daughter and because he loves me, and that's enough. And so that's kind of my whole eating disorder journey. So there was a bit of kind of more of the anorexia in the beginning, but honestly, I would say the eating disorder I struggled with the most was binge eating. And that was another area where I just felt very ashamed because in my mind, I was like, at least if you're not eating, it seems a little bit more, it boasts more of discipline. And I am struggling with a lack of discipline. Like, I just can't stop myself from eating. I'm eating in secret. I'm waiting till my friends go to bed and then just binging on everything I can because I believe the lie that tomorrow is when my diet's going to start and I'm going to get back on track and I'm going to lose the weight I've gained. And so it was just a very unhealthy cycle for 7 years of my life.
Yeah.
Now, I will say with getting and going through the classes, classes were helpful. Being very open and honest with my community was very helpful. And then also too, I ended up moving back home for a season before going to college. So there's about a year interim between where I was living in Colorado and moving to Arkansas that was with family that I was going through my eating disorder recovery. And I remember having to be okay with the size I was in the season that I was in because once I had chosen that I wanted to get better, there's this mindset that I knew I wasn't healthy and I knew that the weight I wasn't a healthy weight in general. And so there's this desire to be like, okay, well, I just want to get back down to a healthy weight, whatever it is, and not be so overweight. Because I was probably 50, 60 pounds overweight. And so that kind of just took patience and trusting the process. And I'll tell a lot of people that when they ask what helped, you really do just have to ultimately trust the Lord, but trust the process too, because recovery really is forward motion and then a lot of backward motion, and then a little bit of forward motion and backwards and forwards. And so it can be discouraging if you're just wanting forward motion until you're healed, but that's just
Yeah.
not really the truth of the matter. And so I remember just always having to repeat myself truths like, whatever size you are, as long as you're trying to be healthy today, that's enough. And so,
Yeah.
whatever weight you are, as long as you're doing what's healthy for you in this season and you're not being strict and you're not dieting and you're just being healthy, that's enough. And so, it didn't always help, or and it didn't always be like, okay, yeah, I'm good. But that was another big thing that really helped in my journey was having truths that I had on deck to speak over myself because it's so easy to want to believe the lies that the devil tells you. And truly, if he can keep you discouraged and he can keep you isolated, then he's got you won. And so I really had to have just some truths, biblical, but also kind of worldly truths too, of just going like, okay, you're being healthy, that's enough. And then the biblical truth of you're fearfully and wonderfully made, Psalm 139 says so. And just repeating it constantly until you start believing it. And so it might seem a little cliche at times, like we'll just speak scripture, but scripture is just filled with so much truth and it's universal truth that even if you have to repeat the same thing over and over and over again until you start believing it, it's so important to do so. And so that was a big part too of my journey of just constantly repeating truth on the days that I felt discouraged and reminding myself, okay, it's all part of the process. I'm not going to take 7 years and then be okay in a day. Like it's going to take some time.
It is so good. I'm so glad you said all of that. Okay, especially because it doesn't matter what struggle. I love the ending part because it doesn't matter what struggle you're in when you're trying to become healthy. If you've been struggling with that for years, like it's
Mm-hmm.
gonna take time to flip the switch, if you will.
Yeah.
And like with my own story, like I didn't struggle with an eating disorder, but I did struggle with like believing a lie, walking in the flesh, and like learning to walk in the spirit, like as Galatians says, like
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna take some time. It's not, I love what you said, if I've been struggling with this for 7 years, the next day, like it's gonna take time. And I think being okay with like what you're saying, the small victories,
Mm-hmm.
and you still have that end goal, but like every day, just like as long as I'm as healthy as I can be, like that's
Mm-hmm.
the small victories. I don't think as the church, we do enough encouragement for those small victories.
Yeah.
And like saying like, hey, I see you trying, I see you trying your best. Like, yes, there's that end goal, but today you got out of bed today, like whatever it is that you did, um, just really like appreciating those small victories, and not being discouraged.
Honestly, like you said, it really is celebrating the small victories because without the small victories, you can't win the ultimate battle that you're fighting. And I remember there were even days where I would kind of, like part of my recovery class was to journal futuristically, but in the moment, if that makes sense. So it's like the person I want to be healed, right? As if you're that person now. And so I remember just writing kind of affirmations of, I'm going to go through a day without worrying about my next meal and stressing about the next thing I'm going to eat or not eat or not think about food. Like I'm just going to eat and just do it naturally. And those things seem so huge, like I'd never achieve them in the moment. But then I remember the day that it happened and I was like, wow. And I just really believe the Lord kind of put that on my mind of just going, you made it through the day without worrying and stressing about what you're going to eat. And it was such a big victory, even though to someone else it might be so small. But when you've lived so many years of your life just really stressing and agonizing over meals that you're about to eat or spontaneous meals that maybe people suggest, and you're like, I can't go out to eat. I didn't plan to go out to eat. I didn't even work out today. I can't go out to Chick-fil-A. Like no one said anything about Chick-fil-A, and you start stressing. It was huge. It was huge. And so I agree. You really have to celebrate the small victories and just recognize the work that God's doing because if you don't, you can get discouraged.
Yeah, and so we talked about there's more than just two eating disorders, but I figured the you talked about starving yourself.
Mhm.
They have like real names, but I figured we could just do the kindergarten version of them because people will
No,
understand
absolutely.
it better. So
Uh-huh.
there's like starve yourself, whereas like you don't take in enough calories
Hmm.
for what you're eating or for what you're needing. And then there's the binge, like what you said, where
Hmm.
you're kind of like overeating. I know some people like cause themselves to throw up afterwards or whatever. Um, and then there's this category. Let me get her passy real fast.
Good.
Sorry. Oh, I was trying to see if she would. Okay. Okay. And then this is gonna be an interesting episode. This is like
Okay.
the raw,
It's
authentic.
it's real life. I was gonna say there's
Yeah, yeah,
unfiltered, and that's okay.
raw, authentic. I'm sorry. Okay.
No, if it makes you feel any better, I gave Addison a bottle of puffs, and I think she's dumped them out, and she's just playing with them in her crib right now. She may eat a whole bottle, and you know what? I guess that's okay. We'll just
Yeah,
see what
for the
happens.
moment. Yeah. But then there's like this obsession that I
Mhm.
don't think we talk about or see as here you go. Or see as an issue like we should. It
Mhm.
can be your obsession with like a number on the scale.
Mhm.
So you might eat, but in what you're saying in the back of your head, you're constantly like, well, I can't go over this number, or I have to stay at this number. And then what was the other thing that I said? Yeah, worrying about body image obsession, like my stomach has to look a certain way. I might not look at the number, but I'm looking at like my waist or my butt or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and then like self-hate towards your body image. And
Mhm.
so, is she loud? Like, can you hear that? Is that like real?
No, she's being quiet.
Okay. She's like oohing and on. Um, Go to sleep. She also fights her sleep when she gets tired.
It's kind of
Um
us as humans, thinking
yeah.
we know what's best for us.
Um but okay, so whenever here you go. Whenever I had gotten diagnosed with narcolepsy senior year of high school, the
Mhm.
medication I went on, some medications make you gain weight. The
Mhm.
medication I went on totally masks masked, sorry, that was hard to say,
Yeah.
masked, um, your hunger. So
Mm,
I could not, when I tell you I could not, I felt full all the time.
mhm,
I didn't get hungry. Like
mhm,
literally did not get hungry. So I lost like a ridiculous amount of weight. I was like
mhm,
anorexic. I was too skinny.
mhm,
Um, and after that, it freaked me out because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm losing all this weight. Like, it honestly did the opposite effect of what you're saying.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
for years, the devil I was like obsessed. You talk about, oh, my friends are going out to eat, but I didn't plan to go out to eat. I like was so
Mhm.
rigid with like eating. It was an obsession. Like, and I
Mhm.
would honestly overeat because I was so scared that I wasn't going to eat enough that I was
Yeah.
going to, because we were in track. We were running, we were burning calories, and I was
Mhm.
so scared I was going to lose more weight. I mean, it literally was the opposite of like, but it's still what probably would be considered an eating disorder, even though it's not like I want to lose weight. I wanted to gain some weight that I had lost because I was just too skinny and it was
Mhm.
so unhealthy. And yeah, and my I remember my mom in the kitchen, I was like stressing and freaking out because I was like, I haven't eaten enough today and like all this stuff. And I remember
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
mom saying, like, the devil has your mind. Like he is running
Mhm.
circles around you. Like he is causing you to believe basically a lie. And
Mhm.
even though at that time she said that, I didn't like receive it like I should have because in the moment
Mhm.
of you freaking out, you don't always like receive the truth. I think that was a seed that was planted that over time started to make me realize like, okay, what you're talking about, trusting the Lord, like
Mhm.
really trusting the Lord and saying, okay, God, like you've called me to run these sports or do these activities, but you've also called me to the body image that I have. And like
Yeah. Absolutely.
he's gonna take care of you and he's gonna and it's so funny because like I worried about when I got pregnant and started gaining a lot of weight. I worried
Mhm.
about with Briston, like, was he gonna think that I was attractive? Like
Yeah.
what still because I know I got a baby in me, but I got this big round stomach and my
Yeah.
ankles are
Yep.
no
Mhm.
more and like all this stuff. And um I just remember Briston like really saying like Carly, like you have to like God's called us to have a child,
Mhm.
God's
Mhm.
called us to be together. And just going back to like really trusting the Lord and giving up control for things.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you want to add anything before we go to the next.
Yeah. No, I would just agree with everything you're saying. It it's interesting how a lot of people think the problem's the eating disorder, but honestly, I believe that eating disorders are just the fruit of a deeper root. And the root really just becomes the lie that who we are is not enough, that who God made us to be is not enough, that God forgot something important along the way of creating us, that if we could just change that thing about us, then we would be all that we could be. And honestly, when you think about it, it kind of just reflects the garden. I mean, Adam and Eve were created just how they were supposed to be, and yet they believed the lie that there's more out there for you. You just need to try it out. You just need to doubt what God's already told you is enough. And so that was a huge thing for me. And it's kind of one of those aha revelation moments when I was like, wow, it's not the eating disorder that's the enemy. That's just the fruit of this root of me struggling with who I am and who God created me to be and not being thankful for that person. And I agree with you. It's kind of interesting. You were saying how when you gain weight, you have that fear of, are people still going to love me? And it was interesting because when I went back to Colorado about a year or so later, I'd obviously lost weight from the time I had been living there because I had now been pursuing healing for a while. And I remember just thinking, people are gonna see how much weight I've lost. I'm gonna look so different. The way they knew me isn't the way I am. And not one person said anything about my weight. And it kind of made me realize that once again, people love me as a friend for my character and how I love them as a friend. And it has nothing to do with the way I look, it has nothing to do with the weight on a scale. Like, I'm Kirsten because I'm Kirsten, not because of my size, not because of my athleticism. It's just because of who I am, like my core of a person and Christ in me and how I care for people. That is what makes friends, not the way I look or who I am. And so
Yeah,
I
that is
definitely relate with what you're saying with that
yeah,
too.
that is good. I remember, yes, that is good. Oh crap. I okay.
Let me grab her real quick. She might
Okay,
sit with
yeah.
us for
Do, do, do. Looking at lady? Oh. You're like bobblehead. Bobblehead. Hey!
say hi. Yeah.
She can
Say we
okay.
came down with a little cold a couple days ago, so we're
Oh.
still getting over it. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Honestly, too, I would say such a huge thing and such an answer to prayer I get to see every day is when I first signed up for my eating disorder classes. I remember having this moment of realizing that healing was so much more than me. And we kind of talked about that a little bit over the phone. But I just remember being kind of impacted with this thought that I don't want my future daughter one day. And at this time, I was definitely not even dating anybody, but just this mindset of going, I don't want my future daughter one day to go through half of anything I've ever gone through and believing the lies that I've believed that have just stolen so much of my years of life. And so just kind of like looking outside the box and going, I'm pursuing healing so much more than just for my benefit. I'm pursuing it because one day when I'm a mom, I don't want my kids to struggle with unhealthy habits because they see it reflected in their mom. And so now it's cool getting to see my own daughter and having a daughter first of going, wow, like I pursued healing for Addison way before Addison was even a thought. But I knew that one day I wanted to have kids and I didn't want them to struggle with the things that I struggled with.
That's so true. Because I remember oh, it's okay. It's okay. I remember also same thing like receiving healing for an addiction that I had, and I remember thinking like I do not want this to be like I know she's gonna struggle with something, but
Mm-hmm.
because we live in a fallen world, but I
Yes,
was
yeah.
like I do not want this to be a generational curse of
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
never, nipping it out, cutting it off.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do everything in like my power and trusting in God to at least prevent her from, saying like I did all I could to
Yeah.
prevent her from experiencing that. Are you talking?
No,
But
100%.
yeah, and scripture talks a lot about I wanted to bring up some verses about, what the Bible says about beauty. And it's funny because when I looked this up, we refer this a lot to like not wearing jewelry or not like
Mm-hmm.
not like what am I trying to say? Putting beauty on externally, like looking at
Mm-hmm.
beauty externally. And it's in First Peter 3 and it says your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as, elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. And when I read this verse, I mean, I'm not a theologian, but when I read this verse and us having the internal thought process of like, okay, we're going to talk about eating disorders. So that kind of being already in the forefront of my mind. When I read this verse, I always, when I read this verse before, I'm like, okay, I never thought of it this way. And what I mean is like it says, your beauty should not come from outwardness, so our body image, and us trying to make our hair cute and put on certain clothes to make us look good and things like that. And it says, rather your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. And I know
Mhm.
women always get like hyped up about that. But
Yes, yeah.
when I read it this time, it was like, okay, a gentle and quiet spirit. Like, I'm not worried. I don't have all of this negativity and this doubt, self-doubt, and this self-hatred going on in my mind. Like the inner quiet, gentle and quiet spirit, like I'm being gentle to myself. I'm being gentle about the thoughts to myself. I'm being quiet. I'm not stressing. I'm not worrying about like what I look like and stuff. And so it was interesting reading that, which he says is of great worth. And it's funny you talk about identity and you talk about like your self-worth and am I enough? And how really having these healthy thought processes about ourselves is like, I think we don't recognize how much God cares about how we see ourselves. Like we
Mhm.
don't think that it's such a big deal when probably in God's eyes, I mean, you have a child,
Mhm.
it's like if my child was self hatred towards themselves, I mean, that's gonna like break your heart, you know? And so it's recognizing like he cares so much more than probably we ever realize about how we see ourselves when we look in the
Yeah.
mirror.
Yeah. No,
So,
absolutely. And it is, we live in a very, um, oh, what's the word I'm thinking of? We live in a very possession, I guess, driven world where what you wear, what you drive, how you look, it's especially too when I moved to Hot Springs, I was so shocked by how image driven our community was. Not everybody, but definitely a lot, especially high school girls. And I work a lot with high school girls, and it breaks my heart because I see the insecurity, even if it's a girl that is from world standards, the most popular girl at her school. I just see such an insecurity that's driving everything they do.
yeah.
And it breaks my heart because, like you said, they believe the lie that that outward adornment, whatever it might be, is what at the end of the day fulfills them and gets them everything they need or want. And it will fill that hole in their heart. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're good. This is motherhood 101. You're getting the real
Right. Oh, I
authentic
know.
But yeah, that's so good. About and I just want to say because like there are different personalities. So I don't like I knew this one girl in high school. She genuinely loved makeup. Like
Mhm.
she just enjoyed putting on makeup, putting on eyeshadow, like putting on lipstick. Like she enjoyed that. And so I do think like if you enjoy, like don't be discouraged if
Mhm.
it doesn't mean you I personally don't think it means you can't wear makeup or you
Yeah,
can't,
yeah.
dress cute or you can't do
Mhm.
your hair cute. Like be you and don't feel like you have to I don't know, like
Yeah,
morph
no,
to a certain
absolutely.
image of, well, that means I can't, look. I don't think that, that means that or whatever. But I
No, no, I agree with you. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. We skipped our afternoon nap, so we're at the point, like you said, fighting sleep, throw it in. Um, No, I don't think that at all means that, okay, you have to never wear makeup again, kind of dress down. You can't dress up and I'm the worst person to ask about that just because I've never like I love dressing up, but this is my day to day. And
yeah.
so I get very lazy with just my sister's opposite and they're amazing with it, and they like you said, they just genuinely like it. But I think that once those things start shifting from I enjoy them to they're my identity,
Yeah.
that's where once again something good can become something bad, because now, like you said, you're almost having this insecurity driven, I do these things because without it, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And once again, it kind of just all shifts back down to that lie of how God created me to be is not enough and I need more
Yeah.
and something needs to change about me, even
Yeah.
though we know that we're made in the image of God. It says so in Genesis 1:27, I want to say. Um, but we believe that lie of, even though I'm made in the image of God, I could be better. I'm not enough.
Yeah, that's so good. Um, and then I think too, just always keeping like the true goal in mind. Like, Proverbs 31, we're always like, let's be a Proverbs 31 woman.
Mhm.
And it says that, charm is deceitful or deceptive. Sorry, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a
Mhm.
woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And that's something that I constantly have to remind myself because I do enjoy, I don't put on a lot of makeup, but I do enjoy, waking up, dressing cute, things like that. And I have to remind myself, okay, Carly, at the end of the day, like, what's the goal? Is the goal, to dress cute, or is the goal to fear the Lord and to pursue Christ and
Mhm.
become godlier every day? And
Yeah.
just always keeping that in mind of like keeping that goal in mind of, and it's so funny, my husband Briston,
Mhm.
when I was expressing to him my insecurity, and I think that's a big thing, being open and honest with your spouse about, hey, I'm struggling, or with your friends. It doesn't have to just be your spouse, but like what you were saying of like, hey, I am struggling with my weight, or I'm struggling with what my face looks like, or maybe you have acne and you're struggling, or maybe you're struggling with your boobs, or like whatever it is.
Mhm. Yeah.
um just being honest, because I remember opening up to him about, I'm gaining weight with being pregnant. I don't look like these other pregnant women that I know that literally they
Mhm.
have like a little basketball and they barely gained
Yeah.
weight, and I'm like, I remember when I looked up the average weight gain for pregnancy and it said 25 to 35
I was gonna
pounds.
say you shouldn't have done
No,
it.
seriously. And I doubled that. And I was only like 6 months pregnant. I still had
Mhm.
like 3 months to go. I'm like, I have
Yeah.
already doubled this average.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember him saying, he said, Carly, he said, I chose to marry you for better or for worse. He was
Mhm.
like, I gave that commitment. So he said, if you become super fat and super unhealthy, he was like, I don't want that. But
Yeah.
he was like, I committed to you. So it was funny. It was like a funny
Mhm.
moment, but it was just showing like, okay, you didn't just marry me for, I know men are very visual, but you just
Mhm.
didn't marry me
Yeah.
just for that. Like you gave a commitment to, no matter what happens, no matter if I lose my hair or,
Mhm.
whatever, like you're gonna stay committed. And so I just think like also having that perspective in marriage, because I will say, and you can probably speak into this too,
Mhm.
from getting married, it's not like your insecurities just go away. Like, it's not like, okay, when we're dating, I might worry about other girls, but once we're married,
Yeah. It's
it's just
locked in.
fine. And yeah, I mean, like, that's not reality. I mean, your marriage brings out your struggles. I mean, they bring out
Yeah.
your struggles. And so taking care of them, if you can take care of them before you get married, I highly recommend
Mhm.
that. Because when you get married, I would say the first year you don't think about it, but then after that, I mean, at least for me personally, and I will say, my family's history, my mom had cheated on my dad, so that probably, has an effect to it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, the root.
still, like, just being confident in that your spouse is gonna stay.
Mhm. No,
For me.
100%. And it's funny that you say beauty's fleeting because you can definitely feel that way. And I'm right there with you. That's why I'm laughing because I'm not laughing at you. I was the same way. Like genuinely, I felt like I was at a healthy place when we got pregnant. We prayed to get pregnant. Like it was such a desire. So it wasn't this, I didn't even want this, she's ruining my body. It was a prayer that was answered. And I gained probably 60 pounds. Um, through the whole pregnancy. And same, they tell you like, oh, a healthy pregnancy should only be 25 pounds.
And you're like,
It's not true. And honestly, I was so thankful to be 9 months pregnant and get to the point where I couldn't see the scale anymore when I'd go for my checkups because I'm like, I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know because I know I'm like way over what I've ever wanted to be again in my life. And I remember having a conversation with Jonathan telling him, I said, I know I'm pregnant and I can feel her move and it's such a gift, but I said, I've never been pregnant before. So really, this just makes me feel like I'm getting fat again and I'm just being unhealthy. And so honestly, those 9 months were, well, those 4.5 months, I feel like when you really start gaining weight,
yeah.
it was such an opportunity to dig back into truth. And like you said, being open and honest with my spouse and also inviting me into it once again because you're only as strong as those are around you pointing to the truth. Because if we
Yeah.
rely on our feelings, while our feelings are real, they're not reliable. And so you're going to just be rooting yourself in lies instead of grounding yourself in what we know is true. And like you said, you have to keep reminding, like, hey, God's forming a life inside of me. I get to be a part of it. And I remember too, I was so anxious at the beginning of pregnancy because it seems like when you're pregnant, that's when everybody's miscarriages stories start coming out. So I was so anxious about having a miscarriage, and I was just hearing about so many people miscarrying on their first. I remember praying, like, God, I don't care how much weight I gain as long as I have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby. And I remember I had to go back to that on those days I was really struggling because I was reminded of, like, hey, I made this promise to the Lord that regardless of whether I have a healthy pregnancy or not, I made the promise of, like, God, I'm going to do my part to not get discouraged with weight gain. I'm not going to let myself become swayed by the lies of my identity is wrapped up in my weight, and I'm not Kiki anymore. I'm not Kirsten anymore because I'm now X amount of numbers on the scale, and like you said, I definitely had an opportunity to practice that. And it didn't actually like come off right away after having Addison, but just that faithfulness of being grounded in truth, being open and honest with those around you, like you said, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, inviting people into that can go, hey, I hear how you're feeling, but remind yourself what's true. And when you have that, like I said, you don't want to just suppress your feelings because they are real. What you're feeling is real, but they're not reliable. They're not going to point you towards God's truth. And so that was my biggest thing. Because like I said, I felt like I was in a great place with my eating disorder. I felt like I hadn't struggled with it, and then I started gaining all this weight with Addison, and it was very tempting to want to slide back into kind of familiar ways and familiar patterns, and like you said, start restricting and um, fighting the urge to binge on the day. So it's a constant, and that's kind of my thing with where I'm at right now. I know God can heal people like that. I know God can give you the strength for the rest of your life to overcome struggles. I genuinely feel like God has healed me, but I have recognized going through seasons of life where the devil has tried to tempt me to slip back in to old patterns because that's kind of, even as toxic as it sounds, my eating disorder was so familiar to me that it was scary to want to move on from it because it was unknown. Like healing was unknown to me, and my disorder was so familiar. I wanted to cling to it because it's what I knew. And so there is that temptation of going, I want change, but I don't want to do what it takes to change because I don't know what that's going to look like. And right now, I'm so comfortable and familiar with where I'm at. I'd rather stay here and just deal with it versus overcome it. And I think that's a lot of struggles that people have with toxic relationships, disorders, addictions, whatever it might be, there's that familiarness that makes you want to stay versus the driving force to make you want to change.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool that you said that because I literally did a live, I think yesterday or the day before, and I was like, I had this revelation that all the people that Jesus healed and delivered and, saved, they had to do that. Like, don't think that the people that Jesus healed, it was just easy for them to get up and walk or get up and leave because as someone who like has narcolepsy, people have been like, pray for healing, believe for healing, and I do, but it's literally what you said. It is you don't it's the unknown. It's like, well, what is my life going to look like? Like this is so familiar. I can master coping with the narcolepsy. I can master coping with the eating disorder. I can master coping with the sin. And it's almost like it's easier to just sit in it than to have to go through it's okay. To have to go through the healing process of like the unknown. Like, I don't know what this is going to look like. And it's kind of scary. So I love that you said that because that was kind of confirmation.
I love that you use that word too, because I really do. When you said that word, it just made me think we cope, which leads to complacency, and complacency really is where it's going to keep you stuck in your sin. It's going to keep you isolated from what God has from you, because, like you said, we'd rather cope and stay complacent than
Yeah.
step out in faith into what God has for us. And now, as someone who's done that and can look back on where I was, I'm just so thankful and grateful that God gave me the courage to do it, because really my healing, my story, it all reflects back to him. I got to be a part of it, but genuinely it's just God's power consistently showing up and always being present, but taking me to realize. And so to me it seems more like showing up, but of realizing that I could never do it on my own, and that's why it took 7 years to overcome it, because I was trying to white knuckle it. I was trying to do it in my own works and my own strength. And when I finally accepted that my own works and strength weren't enough, that's really when I submitted to the Lord and to what He had available to me. And that's when healing actually took place. And like I said, even though it was a process, there was peace in that process, and there was that submission to that process, which really then led to the change. And so I would think, or I would encourage anyone who might be struggling with, like you said, whether an addiction, whether an eating disorder, whatever it might be, stop fighting and trying to do it on your own strength, because the longer you do that, the longer you'll stay where you are. And even though you might feel like you're seeing improvement, you'll always slip back into the old patterns, because then, like you said, it's familiar and it's what we know, and our strength isn't enough to break strongholds. And it really takes the Lord's strength to break those strongholds in our life, and He wants to do it, is what is even sweeter. He's not just willing to do it, He wants to do it. And so I believe that when we start realizing that, and when we submit to His control over our life, that's when we experience this this next, I would say, like, life that He has for us. And it's so much sweeter, it's so much better than what we could have ever tried to manufacture in our own life. But it really first takes that submission and acknowledging that, hey, it's going to take God's strength, not my own, and it's going to take me letting go of what I think I'm controlling and stepping into and walking into God's control. And honestly, healthy habits moving forward. Um, what health looks like for me, when I was going through recovery, I went through a season where I did not run, and I really didn't work out much, because running was now something that wasn't enjoyed by me. It was a form of punishment. And so I just made the commitment, I'm not going to run until I can come to a place where it's going to be healthy. And when I did start running again, I started just doing 10 minutes a day. And for someone that can kind of be type A, that was really hard to do, because I made the commitment that whether it's a mile in those 10 minutes, it's less than a mile, over a mile, I don't know. I'm just going to run 10 minutes a day until I can get back to this place of enjoyment again. And now, looking at 4 years later. I mean, I had the opportunity to run back where I lived in Colorado a couple weeks ago. I took a group of high school girls up there for a senior trip, and I went running with one of my friends that was a leader, and there was just this kind of um, out of body experience, appreciation of going like, wow, when I lived here before, I was so unhealthy, I couldn't even imagine going for a run, and now I get to be back here going for a run in a place that I love and in a body that God's healed, which made me enjoy running so much more. And there are days where I don't want to go out and run, but because I'm training for something I do, it's some discipline I have to have. But I try to always just be thankful in it because I recognize that something I now take advantage of um, is something I wouldn't have been able to do 4 years ago. And so every day I'm able to move, whatever it is, walking, being outside with my, dogs and with Addison, whatever it is, I can choose to just be so grateful for that and not allow this mindset of I have to burn this many calories, I have to run this far, I have to do these things to have it be healthy to me. It's really just moving my body and being thankful I can, because it's such a gift to be able to do those things where I once would not have been able to.
That's good. So as we end, because you kind of like answered the questions as you were talking. So as we end, like what are some practical tips and healthy ways we can see ourselves in a healthy way, but then also like what you're saying, set goals. You kind of went into it, but like how do you want to be healthy, you want to have a good weight, but you also want to maintain that mindset of not being obsessive and not over analyzing yourself. So like what are some ways we can achieve that?
Yeah. I actually at Washa I studied nutrition for a while too, and so I do have some nutrition background, and we had to take a lot of health orientated classes. And while there's some good things in it, there's some things that just from personal experience, I would say as someone recovering from something like an eating disorder, you do have those encouraged 150 minutes of movement a week that they say, hey, if you can move 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, then you'll be healthy. But really, health begins in the mind and it begins in the heart. And so you could exercise 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 7 days a week, and it still wouldn't come from a place of health if that's not is what is motivating it. And so I would say find ways that you can be healthy that aren't going to be super restrictive. And so, like I said, for me, what that looked like is I just walked 3 or 4 times a week. It wasn't far. I didn't do it from the standpoint of I have to burn this many calories on my walk. I would just walk 30 minutes, try to get outside, try to unplug, try to just use that opportunity to pray and to get my mind off of me. Because when you're going through a disorder, it's very tempting to always just be self focused because that's where the problem is, right? And so I try to use that time to just get my mind off myself, be outside, and try to be thankful and try to remind myself of the blessing to move my body. Some other practical tips too is really don't restrict. Okay, one of the best illustrations I ever had, and I'll try to say it quick before it ends, but the lady that did my eating disorder class, she said, you're gonna be like a soda bottle and you've been restricting for so long, which is like tightening that lid and shaking it up. And when you finally unscrew that lid, you're gonna start having stuff fizz out because you've been restricting, 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 or you've been binging, 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 whatever it might be. When you start taking that cap off, it's gonna fizz out. But stay patient with it because eventually, like that fizz, everything's gonna settle. And so don't freak out and be like, oh, never mind, I'm just gonna go back on a diet and everything will be okay. Submit once again to the Lord, let everything settle, and eventually you'll get to that place where you're like, man, I can eat these things and not be stressed about it. I can move for this long and it's a blessing. I can do all of this without whatever might have been your motivation before. And so that was the most helpful thing for me. And that would just be a practical tip I would send on to someone else who might be listening to this. Let it settle and submit to God.